He chose option 2 directly. Hanju couldn't be bothered to care about what a heavenly devil was and directly chose the second option. The upgrade of the Tao field was too important. You chose to cultivate in a low-profile manner and obtained a great Tao fragment and a chance to upgrade the Tao field. The Tao field has begun to upgrade. Hanju immediately felt better. No matter how the heavenly devils and sages attack, I'll stay in the Tao field and see who can kill me. Hanju recalled his choice. Heavenly Tao's evolution process? He recalled carefully. In the legends of the primordial world, the first heavenly Tao calamity seemed to be a battle between the Tao and the devil. Could this be the heavenly Tao's fate? Regardless of whether it was fate, Hanju was not interested. If the Tao field is upgraded this time, won't it be able to block a great Tao level attack? Hanju looked forward to it silently with bright eyes. It always took time to level up the Tao field. At the same time, boundless golden rain poured down, isolated by the Tao field's array formation. It formed a spectacular golden barrier high in the sky, like a projection or a miracle descending. The disciples of the hidden sect sensed that something was wrong. To be able to trigger the array formation meant that this golden rain was extraordinary and might be dangerous. There's indeed danger. Who wants to harm us again? It's really strange. Our hidden sect has always been hiding in the 100-peak immortal river. The sect master is also cultivating in seclusion. Why are there always forces looking for trouble with us? I'm not sure. I think the hidden sect might be too strong. Cultivate well and strive to become a personal disciple as soon as possible. You can serve the hidden sect in the future. Discussions ensued in the 100-peak immortal river. Most of the unnamed disciples had joined the 100-peak immortal river before they transformed. This was their first home, let alone the living beings born in the 100-peak immortal river. They were even more sincere towards the hidden sect. Under Li Xianeo's persuasion, other than Hanju, the personal disciples also began to preach to the unnamed disciples and chose the disciples they liked. The cohesion of the entire hidden sect was already very strong, like an iron plate. At this time, even if the sages sent disciples to fan the flames, it was useless. With the protection of the Tao field array formation, the heavenly devil golden rain was completely useless. Half a day later, the golden rain vanished and the 100-peak immortal river welcomed peace again. Time passed. 100 years passed. The Tao field has been upgraded. The array formation has been upgraded to the Freedom Sage level. It has expanded the internal space of the Tao field. Tao field immortal chi has increased by 10 times. Connate chi has increased by 5 times. The Tao field can block the prying of great Tao divine spirit existences. 3 lines of words appeared in front of Hanju. The spirit chi of the entire 100-peak immortal river began to increase, causing all the disciples to be in an uproar. Sect Master was using his mystical power again. Freedom Sage level? So the Freedom Sage was stronger than the Heavenly Tao Sage. Hanju couldn't help but think of Li Zizai. How did this fellow transcend in just tens of thousands of years? Could it be that Li Zizai was a sage himself, but one of his Dharma idols, the Li family's ancestor, had an immortal emperor cultivation level? After fusing thousands of Dharma idols, the Li family's ancestor's identity became his true body? Hanju felt that this was the only possibility. Otherwise, it didn't make sense. Can the Heavenly Tao sages barge in if they attack the Tao field together? Hanju asked in his mind. No! This time, the system did not deduct his lifespan. It was probably related to the previous derivation. The system had already remembered the cultivation of the sages. Seeing the word no, Hanju heaved a sigh of relief. He felt refreshed. Let's see how you deal with me now. Hanju even wanted to jump out and provoke the sages. But he restrained himself. Find up Ted Ovels on MV Elben, Co-M he had become arrogant. Hanju cursed himself for having an unstable Tao heart. How could he be arrogant because of the Tao field? No matter how strong the Tao field was, he was not that strong. His cultivation was the most important. Hanju adjusted his state of mind and started cultivating. He also checked the recent emails. Your good friend Jiangdugu has become a pseudo-sage. His cultivation has transformed. Your good friend Ji Xianshan has stepped into the zenith heaven realm. Because his body contains many powerful wills, his Tao heart is chaotic. Your good friend Huang Jihao has stepped into the deity realm. Your disciple Su Qi has become a chaotic fiend celestial and is condensing a great Tao. Your good friend Pen Xin was attacked by a Buddhist cultivator, X7392. Your good friend Chou Shilai was cursed by a mysterious curse. Your good friend Empress Huta was cursed by a mysterious curse. Your good friend Huang Zuntian has become the sect master of the Jie school. His providence has increased greatly. The immortal world had risen again. Hanju noticed that Ji Xianshan had stepped into the zenith heaven realm and secretly felt that something was wrong. This kid really wanted to walk the path of a villain. His Tao heart was chaotic and he could go mad at any time. There was also Huang Jihao. This fellow was a genius Hanju knew in the mortal world. He had an innate sword heart and later acknowledged Li Xianao as his master. Previously, Hanju had asked Li Xianao about Huang Jihao and he said that he was most likely dead. Hanju knew that Huang Jihao was still alive. The portrait was still there, but he didn't know where he was. Unexpectedly, after Huang Jihao survived the calamity, he had stepped into the deity realm alone. Indeed, those who could survive the calamity were all destined children. Hanju also noticed that Su Qi had become a chaotic fiend celestial, which meant that he had succeeded. He could really use this method to transform his disciples into chaotic fiend celestials. That was impressive. However, Hanju did not plan to turn all his disciples into chaotic fiend celestials. He needed too much energy, and there were also unstable elements. Perhaps the disciples would become arrogant and have a rebellious mind. Hanju continued reading. He frowned upon seeing that Qiu Shilai and Empress Huta were cursed. A sage was pretending to be him. This situation had happened in the previous calamity. Hanju was not surprised, but he was still unhappy. Sages also used such methods? It was true, Hanju was two-faced. It was fun if he did it, but he would feel disdain when others did the same. As he read, the recent immortal world began to become exciting. The excitement had nothing to do with him or the hidden sect. Soon, Hanju entered his cultivation state. Outside the Suisun RD heaven. Great ultimate hall. Ancestor Shitian stared at the sages expressionlessly. Li Muyi, Sage Jinan, Sect Master Tianju, South Extreme Heavenly Venerate, Chou Shilai, and Emperor Shao were all here. Sage Jinan said, Ancestor, your Dharma eyes can definitely see through variables. Is he a chaotic fiend celestial? The other sages stared at Ancestor Shitian with anticipation. If Hanju was really a chaotic fiend celestial, the Dark Forbidden Lord might very well be him. The reason why they didn't suspect Hanju before was that they felt that Hanju was weak. Now that even the three pure sacred ancestor had lost, the sages had to re-evaluate Hanju's cultivation. Ancestor Shitian said calmly, there are no chaotic fiend celestials in this heavenly Tao. You can rest assured. As for the variable, since it's a variable, I can't expose it. The sages frowned. Emperor Shao couldn't help but ask, Ancestor, aren't you biased towards the variable? Could he be your disciple? Ancestor Shitian glanced at him. This variable doesn't harm the immortal world. There isn't even much karma at all. In fact, you are the ones plotting against him. If I support you, I will be targeting him instead. These words made the sages very embarrassed. The sensitive Li Mui couldn't help but glare at South Extreme Heavenly Venerate. Among the four sages of the Tao Sept, South Extreme Heavenly Venerate was the one who advocated plotting against Hanju the most. Li Mui couldn't care less about his reputation and said, that's right. Sage Fated Secrets has already gone mad. If there's another one, the situation will be very difficult to control. In the future, the mad sage might destroy the heavenly Tao. You definitely don't want to see that situation, right? Ancestor Shi Tian said with an indifferent expression. What does that have to do with me? The atmosphere instantly turned solemn. The sages became nervous, afraid that they would offend him. They all knew that Ancestor Shi Tian was an existence that surpassed the heavenly Tao and was also their guardian deity. Because of his existence, they could fight openly and secretly without worries and use the heavens as a chessboard. Ancestor Shi Tian sighed. The heavenly Tao will continue to circulate no matter who it leaves. It's the same even for the Tao ancestor. We can't affect the heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao is very special and might surpass the great Tao in the future. If you are united, you will definitely have a great opportunity in the future. Stop targeting the variable. I've calculated that he's not important to the heavenly Tao. The sages had different expressions, and it was unknown what they were thinking. They all realized that Ancestor Shi Tian did not want to interfere in the heavenly Tao. However, the matter of the Dark Forbidden Lord was a thorn in their hearts. No one would feel good if they didn't pull it out. 600 years later, inside the 100-peak Immortal River, Hanju had just finished preaching to the hidden sect. This lecture lasted for 100 years. He specially mentioned the heavenly devil's existence and explained the golden rain phenomenon. However, the disciples were still in a state of Tao comprehension and had yet to discuss the heavenly devils. Hanju came to the Fusong tree and observed it. After so many years, the Fusong tree was still the treasure he valued the most. To be precise, it was his disciple. Sect Master, when can I transform? The Fusong tree asked, its voice becoming more and more pleasant. It was unknown if it had been led astray by Tu Linger and Tao Comprehension Sword, but it was becoming more and more like a woman. There was no such thing as a male or female tree. Hanju said, why do you want to transform? The Fusong tree said aggrievedly, because I want to move. Don't worry. You will transform sooner or later. At that time, you will be grateful for the time you can't move now. Why? Because you can't move, you can only focus on cultivating. Once you can move, all sorts of mental demons will attack. You can ask the chaotic heavenly dog. I'm tired of hearing these stories, but let's wait a little longer. You can't go out if you don't reach the pseudo-sage realm. The other disciples can't move too. Fine. The Fusong tree felt wronged. Hanju shook his head and laughed. He turned around and left. It wasn't that he didn't let the Fusong tree transform, but that he really couldn't. The Fusong tree was a heavenly Tao divine tree with extraordinary meaning. The heavenly Tao wouldn't let it transform easily. Hanju had tried to help it transform, but he could feel the resistance of the heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao's existence was indescribable, and even pseudo-sage couldn't capture it. However, when it touched the rules of the heavenly Tao, the reaction was very strong. After returning to the Taoist temple, Hanju didn't cultivate immediately but checked his emails. Recently, the changes in the immortal world had been a little big. Hanju became interested and liked to pay attention to the emails when he had nothing to do. This feeling, it was like surfing the web. After more than 20,000 years, the immortal world finally stirred again. It didn't have to be so boring. Hanju saw 2 emails. Your good friend Jiangdugu suffered a backlash from a mysterious existence. His cultivation has fallen to the zenith heaven realm. Your good friend Jiangdugu has become a pseudo-sage. There were dozens of emails between the two. What had happened to Jiangdugu recently? Why was he repeatedly jumping between the zenith heaven and pseudo-sage realm? What was the mysterious existence? Hanju wanted to know, but he didn't want to consume his lifespan for Jiangdugu. Forget it, he would leave it for the future to answer his questions. He would just think about it. In any case, Jiangdugu couldn't threaten him. 7 years later, the leader of the Nether race, Hanyu, came to visit him. Hanyu had come to report the development of the Nether race. Currently, more than 1,000 nether race members had stepped into the deity realm, and the number was still increasing. Actually, Hanju knew this, but he didn't ask Hanyu about it. Hanyu had clearly meant something else. Hanju understood his thoughts and said, "The nether race has developed well. I will especially preach the Tao for them alone and teach them mystical powers." Hanyu was pleasantly surprised. The worst thing about the nether race was their lack of mystical powers. They didn't lack anything in the 100-peak Immortal River. Hanju never avoided them when preaching. It was just that they didn't have a proper master. Their mystical powers were much inferior to the ones the personal disciples possessed. They also wanted to rise in the 100-year competition. Hanju allowed such competition. Seclusion was not cowardice. They also had to work hard to become stronger and pursue strength that allowed them to roam unhindered. Hanju's seclusion was meant to help him stay out of seclusion in the future. After Hanyu left, he continued cultivating. He was getting closer and closer to attaining the Tao. It was impossible to estimate the exact time. Perhaps one day, he would succeed in attaining the Tao. He only needed a suitable opportunity. He only needed to comprehend the great Tao of extreme origin diligently. Time passed. 70 years later, all the disciples woke up from their Tao comprehension state and started to discuss the heavenly devil that Hanju had mentioned. They were only curious and not afraid. That day, when the heavenly devil cast a spell, it did not break through the array formation. This meant that the array formation of the 100-peak Immortal River was powerful enough. On this day, the 100-peak Immortal River welcomed an immortal with white hair. He wore a Taoist robe and had a sword at his waist. He stood on an immortal crane and had an immortal aura. This immortal was Huang Jihao. Looking at the 100-peak Immortal River ahead, Huang Jihao's expression was unnatural. The immortal crane collided with an invisible barrier and stopped. He said, "I'm Huang Jihao. I wonder if Li Daokong and Li Xianyo are here?" The 100-peak Immortal River was silent. No one replied. Huang Jihao frowned. At this moment, Li Xianyo's voice floated out. "Eh? Why are you still alive?" Huang Jihao immediately felt depressed. He said in a low voice, "Master, it seems that you've really forgotten about me. Can I continue to follow you?" "Why?" "I'm being hunted down by the heavenly race." "Why are they chasing you?" "I killed their people." "Why?" What do you mean?" Huang Jihao almost exploded in anger. He had come with joy, but in the end, he was treated like this. He was also a proud person. How could he tolerate this? Li Xianyo said, "It's not that easy to join the hidden sect. I don't have the right to decide, either. I'll help you ask." "Thank you, Master," Huang Jihao replied as he sighed in his heart. He was really curious about the hidden sect. He knew that the hidden sect's master was Hanju. However, during the entire immeasurable calamity, he had never heard of him. Now that the hidden sect was famous, he suspected that it had already changed owners. Get the L test VLS at O, V, E L by Co. Otherwise, how could a proud person like Li Daokong join the hidden sect? Thinking of Hanju, Huang Jihao sighed. He didn't expect that so many influential figures had appeared in the Scarlet Cloud world back then. It was considered one of the top Providence worlds in the mortal world. Just as Huang Jihao was thinking, his vision blurred and he appeared in front of Li Xianyo. Li Xianyo sized him up and clicked his tongue in wonder. "Two mystic divine origin. Not bad. But your potential is a little poor compared to the long-arm ape." Huang Jihao frowned. He had heard of this name before, but he didn't have a deep impression of it. Could it be that there was a long-arm ape hidden in the hidden sect? Li Xianyo said, "Don't cause trouble after entering the hidden sect. Cultivate well in peace. You should be able to sense the immortal chi here. It's denser than anywhere else in the immortal world. This is definitely the best place to cultivate." Huang Jihao sensed carefully and his expression changed drastically. Such dense immortal chi and connate chi. This was even more domineering than the heavenly race's holy land and the sage Dao field. If he cultivated here, Huang Jihao's heart beat faster. He was glad that he had come here. He asked curiously, Master, the master of the hidden sect is? Li Xianao glared at him and said in a low voice, Don't ask what you shouldn't ask. Hanju always wore the sun and moon yin-yang protection. Most of the in-name disciples had never seen his true appearance. Li Xianao guessed that Hanju wanted to hide his identity and naturally couldn't tell Huang Jihao. After Huang Jihao was warned, he became even more curious. Who replaced Hanju? Huang Jihao's addition to the hidden sect did not cause a stir. Not to mention the new disciples, even the old disciples had forgotten about him. Who could remember the small grudge from more than 30,000 years ago? The reason why Hanju remembered Huang Jihao was because he was especially active in the emails. Time passed. After Hanju focused on attaining the Tao, time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye. Another 100 years passed. Hanju walked out of the Taoist temple and wandered around the 100-peak Immortal River. His understanding of the great Tao of extreme origin was already very deep. His cultivation level could no longer increase, but he was still a step away from attaining the Tao. Which step was it? Hanju couldn't figure it out. He felt that he had to relax. The divine light of the sun and moon yin-yang protection shone on Hanju. The disciples who met him along the way knelt down and bowed. He didn't talk to them and continued forward. Looking at his back, the in-name disciples revealed looks of reverence and yearning. Because of Hanju, they had such a place to cultivate in peace. Even sages couldn't threaten them. After walking around the 100-peak Immortal River, Hanju seemed to have comprehended something. This feeling was indescribable. What was a sage? Was it just that their dermic powers were strong? That was not the case. Apart from reaching the limit of his cultivation, he also needed a state of mind. Hanju had too few experiences in his life. It was so few that he was even inferior to ordinary mortals. Perhaps I should go out? Hanju thought silently, and his eyes gradually became firm. If I walk out of the Tao field and travel in the immortal world now, will I be in danger? Hanju asked cautiously. 3 billion years of lifespan will be deducted. Do you want to continue? Continue. No! Hanju heaved a sigh of relief. He returned to the Taoist temple and started to create a heavenly puppet. He had to leave a clone in the Taoist temple before he could leave without any worries. Several days later, Hanju left quietly without alerting anyone. He suppressed his cultivation until it was unnoticeable and used his dermic powers to hide his supreme treasures. He transformed into an ordinary white-robed man with his unparalleled true handsome appearance. It had been more than 30,000 years. This was Hanju's first time traveling the immortal world. Although he knew that there was no danger, he was still a little nervous. However, as time passed, he quickly calmed down. He did not fly, but walked through the world, using his feet to walk past dangerous mountains and precipices. He saw endless, magnificent green lakes, heard wind roars like dragon roars, and also bathed in rainwater caused by immortal qi. As he learned more and more, his understanding of the great Tao of extreme origin also deepened. The great Tao of extreme origin was all-encompassing. All existences could become the great Tao. About 80 years passed. Night fell. Hanju stopped by the lake and started to meditate and cultivate. He recalled his feelings over the years. He wasn't involved in karma with other living beings. He had always walked alone. The moon was like water and the surface of the lake was shimmering. The surrounding forest swayed slightly in the wind. The wind sounded like music as it caused Hanju's black hair to flutter. Swoosh! A sound came from the bushes behind him. A red fox appeared. It looked as big as a human pet cat. It blinked its big eyes at Hanju. Get the L test VLS at O, V, E L by Ko. After hesitating for a while, it carefully came to his side and knelt down like a human, pressing its forehead against the grass. Hanju's eyes remained closed as if he didn't notice its arrival. It called out, but he ignored it. The crimson fox was a little anxious, but it still chose to kneel. The moon set and night alternated. 10 days later, Hanju opened his eyes and glanced at the crimson fox beside him. "Why did you worship me?" The crimson fox said, "I want to cultivate with you. I'm only a mortal. I don't have much cultivation. I'm born with different pupils. I can spy on souls. Your soul blocked my prying." Hanju shook his head and slowly stood up. He wasn't interested in the crimson fox. It couldn't even reach the standard of the system's connate providence bearer. Its potential was average. Hanju left, and the crimson fox followed. The man and the fox continued wandering the world. Hanju didn't expel the crimson fox. He also wanted to see how determined this little fellow was. In the years to come, they experienced all sorts of natural disasters and passed by all sorts of magnificent sights. Occasionally, they would encounter life forms that had transformed. Hanju didn't take the initiative to provoke other living beings, so he didn't encounter any robbery. He didn't look like someone with a supreme treasure. 200 years later, Hanju came to a human city. From afar, sand filled the sky and almost drowned this huge city. He turned around and glanced at the crimson fox behind him. "Let's end it here." With that, he continued forward and vanished into the sand. The crimson fox was silent. It did not follow because it would die if it went, but it did not leave. Instead, it crawled on the sand dune and looked at the huge city in the distance. Hanju came to the city gate. Soldiers were guarding it. He needed to pay spirit stones to enter the city. He casually used his method and took out the spirit stones to successfully enter the city. After entering the city, Hanju's face attracted many people's attention. Hanju didn't deliberately hide his appearance because there was no need. He wasn't afraid of trouble. With a breath, the entire city would be reduced to dust. The city was not as desolate as it looked from the outside. It even looked like spring and was full of life. From time to time, trees could be seen on both sides of the street. It had the good scenery of brilliant rivers. Hanju came to an inn and sat down in a corner on the second floor. After ordering food and drinks from the waiter, he turned to look at the streets outside the window. Looking at the people walking around, he was deeply moved. Not long ago, he was also one of these people. "You seem confused." A laugh sounded, and an old Taoist walked over. Hanju glanced at him. "Grand Unity Golden Immortal." The old Taoist sat in front of Hanju and smiled. "Encounter is a type of affinity. You can ask me if you have any questions. Sometimes, others can see things more clearly and answer them for you." The old Taoist smiled and said, "It would naturally be better if you were willing to treat me to a meal. I travel the world and care about the myriad beings. I have answered the questions of many people, including the human king. The human race was extremely adaptive. Less than 30,000 years after the calamity ended, the human race had inherited the prosperous rules of the previous human race. They had even established the human king. Seeing the prosperity of this city, Hanju thought that he had transmigrated. This was not the ancient era when the heavenly Tao restarted. Hanju smiled and asked, "Then, can you see through my thoughts?" The old Taoist shook his head. "How can we easily see through the heart of a person? Even immortals and gods are afraid of the human heart." Previously bored, Hanju became interested. He smiled and said, "Then, are you an immortal?" "I am but a wandering cultivator." "Then, what do you know about existences higher than immortals?" "They're naturally sages and heavenly beings." Hanju began to chat with the old Taoist. Soon, the food and drinks were served. The old Taoist began to wolf down his food as if he had not eaten in several lifetimes. A Grand Unity Golden Immortal was actually so hungry. It was obvious that he was pretending. This fellow probably wanted Hanju to look down on him and then slap his face later. What was this? pretending to be weak? Hanju found it funny but didn't expose him. He couldn't be taught by a grand unity golden immortal if he wanted to attain the Tao. He would just treat it as an interesting incident. 2 hours later, the old Taoist stood up and smiled. Little friend, you have an unparalleled appearance. I don't know how many hearts you will capture. Perhaps your confusion is the word love. If you have no regrets and don't let others down, you will eventually be open-minded. Looking at him disappear into the staircase, Hanju shook his head and laughed. Fraud! Hanju smiled and seemed to have thought of something. He looked out of the window and continued thinking. Perhaps what he lacked was true experience. Perhaps I can stay here and be immortal for a lifetime. Hanju thought silently. With an idea, he stood up and walked out of the inn. He first bought a courtyard in the city and added furniture and servants. From then on, he lived in this city. His name was still Hanju. There were countless Hanju in the world. His name had yet to shake the immortal world. He wasn't afraid of attracting trouble. Spring passed and autumn came. Hanju stayed in the city for 10 years. This city was called the Eastern Guard. It was one of the cities at the edge of the human race. Occasionally, it would be attacked by ancient race and ferocious beasts, so the array formation was relatively high level. Hanju also completely integrated into the East City and became familiar with the neighbors. On this day, the entire city was covered in snow. Hanju sat in the courtyard and admired the snow, comprehending the true meaning of heaven and earth. The old servant sweeping the snow beside him shook his head and sighed in his heart. Master is lost in thought again. I don't know what he's reminiscing. Hanju's servants were all very good. In their eyes, Hanju's greatest problem was that he would often fall into a daze. Sometimes, it was unimaginable that he could stand in the courtyard for a day and a night without moving. At this moment, a maid rushed in and said anxiously, Master, someone is lying in front of the door. He seems to be dead. The rules of Eastern Guard City were strict. Killing someone meant paying with one's life. If they were mistaken to be the ones who killed them, it would be troublesome. Hanju immediately walked towards the door. He was living as a mortal, so he didn't leave immediately. Arriving at the entrance of the residence, he saw a dirty woman lying in the snow. Already many people were gathered around her. Hanju walked over and quickly breathed a sigh of relief. He then waved his right hand at the woman, dragging her soul back. The woman slowly opened her eyes. Although her face was dirty, her eyes were very clear and bright. Seeing that she had woken up, the surrounding people heaved a sigh of relief. Hanju would give food to the people every year. In their eyes, he was a good person. They naturally didn't want such a problem to happen to him. Miss, go home soon. The snow is too heavy. Be careful not to get lost. Hanju smiled and walked into the courtyard. The breath he gave was enough for the other party to live for another 50 years, no different from ordinary mortals. In the evening, Hanju came to the table and prepared to eat. The servant girl standing at the side said, Master, that woman is still outside the door. She said that you saved her, so she's willing to do anything for you. Hanju said calmly, let her in and find a job for her. The servant girl left. 5 years later, Eastern Guard City welcomed a beast tide that was hard to come by in 100 years. The entire city was on guard. Hanju stood in the courtyard and looked at the smoke in all directions, lost in thought. A woman in green suddenly came over. She was not considered beautiful, but she was strange and likable. Master, are you worried that the city will collapse? The woman in green asked with a smile, not worried at all. She was the female beggar from 5 years ago, Chingwaner. She was only 17 at that time. After entering the Han family, this girl completely didn't treat herself as a maid and always liked to pester Hanju. However, she was indeed capable. She could do all the physical work in the courtyard and was stronger than men. Hanju smiled. Perhaps. Chingwaner curled her lips. The answer is either yes or no. You always like to be so ambiguous. I can't guess what you're thinking. Hanju smiled and ignored her. After a few months, the city still survived tenaciously. However, the soldiers suffered heavy losses and the human king had no choice but to send cultivators to help. The arrival of the cultivators stirred up a cultivation wind in the city. However, the humans were not connate humans. Their bloodlines were inherited from the previous human race of the immeasurable calamity. Their potential was good and bad. Hanju pretended not to have cultivation potential and continued living an ordinary life. Another 10 years passed. Hanju got married. He married Qingwaner. Other than her being interested in him, the servants, neighbors, and good friends had also spoken for her. In the eyes of mortals, he should also start a family and leave behind children. A year later, Qingwaner got pregnant and gave birth to a child. His name was Han Tuo. This was deliberately controlled by Hanju. Otherwise, he would never leave his bloodline behind. He suppressed Han Tuo's cultivation potential, making him look no different from an ordinary person unless he encountered a pseudo-sage who could remove the bloodline seal. Hanju planned to treat him well for a lifetime and take back his body after he reincarnated. After marrying and having children, Hanju's comprehension of the Tao deepened. The 3,000 great Tao were everywhere. Human affairs, earthly affairs, and heavenly affairs all had their own rules. Later, because Han Tuo had yearned to become an immortal who could fly in the sky since he was young, he cried and begged Qingwaner to find an immortal master for him. Qingwaner then looked for Hanju. Helpless, Hanju could only use his connections. In the end, Han Tuo was determined to have no cultivation potential. He was deeply affected. This sit and Felben, CM for EW Uvels in a few days. He was lively again and acted mysteriously every day. Hanju discovered that this kid seemed to be practicing martial arts. To be precise, he was tempering his body. Qingwaner had taught him. Hanju didn't care or asked. On a small mountain in the city, the mother and son were in the forest. The well-dressed Qingwaner looked at the young Han Tuo and instructed, Tuo, regarding this method, you can't spread it out or let your father know, lest he gets frightened. Han Tuo waved his fists and nodded. He was only 9 years old, but his actions were already very sharp. Qingwaner's eyes revealed a pained expression as she thought, if my son had cultivation potential, with such will, he might be able to become an immortal in the future. Sigh. In the hall, Hanju, Han Tuo, and Qingwaner were eating and celebrating Han Tuo's birthday. Han Tuo was very happy. It was unknown if it was because of his birthday or something else, but his face was flushed with excitement. Qingwaner put food into Hanju's bowl. He held his wine cup and asked about Han Tuo's recent homework. The current human race already had an education structure. They could study and obtain fame. Han Tuo replied truthfully. Hanju could clearly see that his mind was not on this. Father, when is your birthday? Han Tuo suddenly changed the topic. Hanju said, I don't remember anymore. Why can't you remember? Where are your parents? They're my grandpa and grandma. I was born without parents. Huh? Han Tuo was stunned. He suddenly realized that he had never cared about his father since he was young. He only wanted to cultivate. Qingwaner chuckled. Look at how hard your father had lived growing up. You have to be filial to him when you grow up. Han Tuo nodded and said proudly, I will become a cultivator in the future and live forever. I will let you live forever together. Tuo is really ambitious. Qingwaner rubbed Han Tuo's head with a benevolent expression. Hanju drank his wine and smiled at the mother and son. Needless to say, after cultivating bitterly for 30,000 years, it was quite good to experience such immortal life. It had a different feeling. However, the lives of mortals were filled with uncertainty. They were not like cultivators who could control their lives. 3 years later, Han Tuo reached the age of 16. Eastern Guard City welcomed danger again. An unprecedented beast tide attacked. The neighboring cities had already fallen. Rumors spread, causing everyone to panic. The city lord began to forcefully recruit soldiers. Male children older than 15 years old had to join the army, and Hantua also went. Snow fell again and covered the sky. The entire city was covered in white. Hanju came to the inn. This was the first inn he had come to in Eastern Guard City. He usually liked to come here. It was still the same old spot. It was by the window on the second floor, allowing him to see people coming and going in the street. Compared to before, the streets of the city were much less crowded, most of them in a hurry. Young friend, long time no see. Your hair has also turned white. Time truly does not spare anyone. A laugh sounded, and the old Taoist who Hanju met when he first came to the Eastern Guard City walked over. He still sat in front of him. After so many years, Hanju deliberately let a few strands of white hair appear on his head. Although he was still handsome, he was no longer young. Hanju smiled. Senior, you're still as white-haired as ever. The old Taoist smiled. Same old rules? Hanju nodded slightly. The old Taoist poured himself a cup of wine and smiled. Young friend, you shouldn't be an ordinary person. Your bearing isn't like that of a mortal. Even though the city is about to be destroyed, you're still as calm as ever. Could it be that you're here to transcend mortality? Hanju asked, what about you? I'm also a transcendent mortal. I travel the world and cultivate my state of mind. What realm are you at? Deity transcendence. You should be undergoing immortal transcendence, right? We are fated. In the future, you can come to my heavenly gate and pursue the great Tao. The old Taoist pinched his beard and smiled proudly. Hanju thanked him indifferently. The two of them started chatting. As they chatted, the roars of ferocious beasts came from outside the city. It was deafening. The people on the street below fled in fear. Hanju and the old Taoist were still drinking and chatting about their experiences traveling the world. Chunyazi has a favorable impression of you. Current favorability, 3 stars. Hanju did not care about this notification. After a long time, Chunyazi stood up to leave. He said, life is filled with shackles. If you want to break free from them, you have to have no desires. His words made Hanju emotional. No desires. This was the realm that ordinary immortals wanted to reach. They wanted to stay away from karma. Hanju was only enlightened but not moved. His Tao was not without desires. On the contrary, he had desires, he had wants. He wanted to live forever, he desired immortality. In order to pursue what he wanted, he would have a stronger motivation to cultivate. This was also the life of many mortals. This was not bad. I've been avoiding the world for so long. Isn't it to be the strongest? After reaching the strongest, I can do whatever I want? Hanju's gaze landed on the panicked people downstairs again. He had a deeper understanding of his Tao, and it was gradually becoming firmer. After being in the mortal world for so many years, he had seen everything mortals should experience. Life, death, love, hatred, and parting with life. Every mortal pursued the control of their life. Hanju was already a pseudo-sage and was still pursuing this Tao heart. When he became a sage, he would do as he pleased. Hanju's eyes became firm. This is my sage Tao, I desire, I want. Hanju entered a meditation state and began to comprehend the great Tao of extreme origin. He wasn't afraid of being disturbed. Not to mention the surrounding mortals, even if the ferocious beasts outside the city attacked, they wouldn't be able to hurt him. The calamity of defending the city lasted longer than before. The battle was cruel and endless. 2 years later, Hanju stood in the courtyard, bathing in the snow. His Tao fruit began to transform. It was transforming towards the sage Tao fruit. Perhaps because his Tao heart was firm, Hanju's dermic powers that had not increased for a long time began to increase again. The breakthrough was coming. Hanju started to hesitate if he should go back. He had a feeling that he would break through in at most 100 years. However, when he thought of Qingwaner and Hantua, Hanju's heart softened. He decided to accompany them until the end. Hanju had changed his mind about Hantua already. Previously, he had wanted to suppress Hantuo's bloodline because he was afraid that he would cause trouble for him and create a large amount of karma. Now, Hanju had thought it through. Excessive worry was a shackle and an obstacle. Hanju showed a carefree smile. Empress Huta sent you a dream. Do you accept? A line of words suddenly appeared in front of him. He asked silently, is it dangerous to accept? 3 billion years of lifespan will be deducted. Do you want to continue? Continue. This sit en Felben. CM for EW Ovals. No. Hanju immediately decided to accept it. Desires and wants didn't mean recklessness. It was always good to be cautious, especially when the other party might threaten his life. In the dream, by the yellow spring, Hanju cupped his hands and bowed. Empress Huta said, the heavenly devils are coming. Killing them awards merit. If the hidden sect wants to become a Providence sect, don't miss it. Hanju smiled and said, thank you for your reminder, Empress. Is the netherworld preparing to besiege the heavenly devils? Yes, we can capture the heavenly devils to be ghost servants. Although these heavenly devils are violent, they are not scheming. In a sense, they are not terrifying. Where did the heavenly devils come from? The actions of the devil race's sages can be considered to be acting in coordination with the heavenly Tao. Through the heavenly devil calamity, a large number of people with great providence will appear. After that, it will probably be the battle for the sage position. Empress Huta revealed a worried expression as she continued, no one in the netherworld is qualified to fight for the sage position. I hope that you can obtain it. If you are afraid of trouble, you can at least let the hidden sect obtain it. Regardless of whether the Tao sect obtains it or the other sages obtain it, it will break the balance that has lasted for a long time. Hanju raised his eyebrows. He held the great Tao purple chi and the primordial purple chi in his hands. They were enough to nurture 2 sages. If he fought for another one, apart from him, wouldn't the hidden sect have 3 more sages? I'm not fighting, but you guys came knocking on my door?